Hey, welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Interdonato. The Black Knight Nation podcast is brought to you by Higher Echelon. It's a company founded by Joe Ross. He's a former Army fullback, former Army assistant coach, former Army soldier, and a guest on the Black Knight Nation podcast. And Joe Ross is in our archives. And so is Pat Work. And if you guys check out our interviews with those two guys in our archives, this is what we're going to have one of their teammates on. Kevin Czarnecki joins us, a linebacker, captain of the 1993 Black Knights football team, or the Cadets football team at the time. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Sal. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. And Joe and Pat Work are great Americans.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that later. But first off, we usually start out about kind of your journey to West Point, a little recruiting story, so to speak. You know, I'm writing recruiting stories still to this day about kids who, kind of their path to West Point. And it's usually a pretty unique experience most of the time. I'm wondering, what your path was to West Point and how they discovered you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have got a really fun story about how I ended there. So my father was a 28-year Army reservist, so service to our country was something that was first and foremost in my mind as I pursued a path to Division I football. I was recruited by many of the MAC teams, being from Grand Rapids, Michigan. But once the West Point and actually Annapolis got interested, things really got really interesting. And so actually, the most entertaining, fun recruiting trip I took was to Annapolis. Annapolis is a great city. The Naval Academy is an amazing place, but I just didn't connect. It just wasn't for me. And when I went to West Point, actually, my host, believe it or not, was Anthony Noto, who was the senior, now the CEO of SoFi. He was actually my host, and he took me, and I think he would recall this as well. He took me for a walk out onto the plain. It was a snowy day in West Point, as you can imagine. And I'll never forget, there were like these 3 or 4 deer that we came across the plain, and it changed my life. It was like, this is the place I'm supposed to be. This is a sign that I'm supposed to be here. And I really connected with the academy and its values. And I realized that it was the path of most resistance, and that's what drew me there, because I knew it was going to be difficult. I knew it was going to be hard, and that's exactly what I wanted to do, and I've never regretted that decision to this day.
When you first start, I mean, I don't know if you can recall your first days at West Point, Beast Barracks or stuff, but did it meet those expectations? Was it as hard at first for you, or were you prepared for what you were going to face at the beginning? Or
I don't think you could ever be prepared for it. As an 18-year-old graduate, obviously you've excelled at the highest level, at the high school level. You've exceeded expectations both academically and athletically. And you show up at West Point and you are the lowest of the low, right? And that's exactly what it's meant to do. It's meant to break you down so that they can ultimately build you back up into a great leader of soldiers, airmen, and seamen. And it really does that. It really exceeds expectations. You're a high school hero, and you show up there and you are a nobody. And that is a humbling position to be in, but I can understand the process, and I absolutely respect it to this day.
Yeah, we talked to a lot of former players who maybe have gone the prep route, the Army prep route. I don't know if you went. Were you a direct or no?
I was direct, actually. Not because my academics were so superior, but I asked Coach Young at the time to go direct. Probably looking back at it today, I know that it's regularly acceptable that everybody goes to the prep school because it makes total sense. It's a redshirt year. I didn't have that opportunity. And looking back at it, I probably should have, but no, I was direct.
Yeah, we talked to former players who maybe went to Army prep or even went direct, and sometimes they're like, they have these moments early in their West Point time where they say, they call home, they say, hey, this is not for me, after a few weeks or so. It doesn't seem like you were one of those guys.
I wasn't. I mean, my family, my father told me, who's now passed away, he told me when I stepped out of the motorhome and I walked into our day on July 2nd, 1990, he said, once you go in, you don't come out. And there was, so like a lot of things in my life, there was no, you hear a lot of folks say burn the boats, don't have a plan B because you want to deliver on plan A. And that's exactly what we did. This is a funny story. My mother sees this. She's going to be pissed at me, but anyways, I'll tell it anyways. I called my mom. I was 4 days into our day. And I was 4 weeks into our day, and I was having a tough go, and I was kind of sobbing on the phone. And my mom, as any mother would do, was, her heart was broken for her son, and he was going through it tough. He was becoming a man, right?
Yeah.
And so she was really torn up about that. And I called a couple of weeks later because remember, back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. We had to go into the phone booths to use and dial the actual numbers. And I called back. My father answered, and he said, don't ever call here and cry to your mother ever again. Be a man, grow up, and go do what's right. And that's just kind of how my Army experience happened.
That's it, right? After that, you just put your head down and you grind, right?
That's it. You just grind.
Yeah. What was do you remember what your freshman year was like as far as on the football side of it? I know
it's actually a good question because I had a unique freshman year. I actually had a catastrophic injury my freshman year. I had 2 fractured vertebrae in my neck, and I actually went to Walter Reed. And I came back, and there was a big question of whether or not they were going to let me play. And so this is chronicled in one of the programs from the year of 1993. But I actually had I had a really bad stinger problem in my shoulder, and they've discovered 2 fractured vertebrae. So I basically sat out my freshman year. My spring of 1991, I was fitted with a stinger brace on my shoulders, which you can see on my playing pictures that I wore ever since. And frankly, I never looked back. Started my sophomore year and was a 3-year starter. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, Sal, without football, West Point would have been a really, really difficult place for me to be. Football was our release. It was our fun time. It took our minds off of all the other things that were going on, whether they be in the classroom or whether they be on the battlefield. Because remember, we are when we were there, we were the class of Black Hawk Down was going on in Somalia, and stuff was real. I mean, it was real. Combat was real, and having football in a release was really the thing that got a lot of us, to include me, through the academy.
Yeah, and when you say that you're able to battle your way through, so to speak, or find a way to keep on playing, that's got to be a big deal to you because you have the background, you have your dad being a reservist in the Army, but yet you want your experience, so to speak, right? You want to have your experience at West Point, and
sure.
you didn't want that taken away from you, I imagine, and to have the just the impact that you were able to have, not only to come back and play football, right, but just have the impact that you were able to have on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, let's give you some flowers here. You're still number 4 in all-time tackles on the Army list with 352, I think. And
yep.
I mean, that's being in a lot of plays, Kevin, during your 3 years, and so that must have been just being able to continue to play, but also to be able to have an impact on the field must have been pretty important too.
No, it was tremendous. I mean, you really, it's not so. I have 2 daughters, exactly what I deserve. One goes to Oklahoma, one goes to Georgia. So they understand big time football, and certainly West Point's not at that level. But this week, Army Navy, we're as important as anybody else in the college football playoff. And to have that experience, back to your question, and to play at a high level against folks that played in the NFL from Boston College and North Carolina and Duke meant the world to me. And it's something that I still cherish to this day.
No doubt. I mean, before we talk about maybe your fondest memories of an Army football player, I always like to ask, like you mentioned, like the competition you guys had to face, and I always like to ask who might have been like the best or the toughest player you ever went up against in your Army career. Would you say?
That's a great question. I wish I would have prepped for it. So Natron Means,
Yeah,
running back from North Carolina, played at the NFL, played for the Chargers, was a great player. In fact, we practiced, I remember, leading up to the week in which we were going to play him. We actually had two defenses called Natron 2, Natron 4. So that tells you what an impactful player he was. And then his name is escaping me. I played against the center for Boston College, who was the center for John Elway's 2 Super Bowls.
oh wow,
And he kicked this. Well, I can't. He gave me a tough day. He gave me a tough day, it was. But it's a sense of pride when you play against elite folks.
yeah,
You can consider yourself a little bit elite on
yeah.
those days, and certainly I cherish those days against Boston College, North Carolina. Some of the best games we've ever played.
It's something that, this year where Army played 3 Power Fives, right? They played Boston College, LSU, and Syracuse. Now with the move to the AAC, you're really only going to get one of those games a season. So those, especially now, the players of the future Army are really, really going to cherish those times where they have to go against the top competition. Yeah, they might face them in a bowl game, right? If Army can have a successful season. But now we'll see maybe the Notre Dames pop up on the schedule. And, I know they had games scheduled out with some pretty elite teams, so we'll have to see how that goes. But back to your career. I mean, what are some of your fondest memories as an Army football player? I'm some of them may center around like this week in the Army Navy game, which we want to talk about. What are some of your fondest memories?
Yeah, sure. Beating Navy 3 times is a big deal, right? It's something that I still talk about today. If I run into a Navy grad or I run into another West Pointer, we talk about how many times you beat Navy. That's a huge deal. And it's meaningful, right? I mean, it's 30 years ago. So it means a lot. So that's obviously a fond memory of mine. I remember playing down at Duke, and the game was delayed because of weather. And, I just remember being so proud of how tough, disciplined, and grind the West Point team was. I mean, I think about guys like Kevin Muir, who's a dear friend to this day, Clay Smith, Tony Sima. I mean, you look to your left and you look to your right, there was no give up in anybody. And those are things that I don't know that everybody experiences in their life. And to this day, those friendships still matter. But man, oh man, when we were on the battlefield, what we called the football field, there was nobody giving up at any cost. And that is something that I think has been valuable for me to this day. And those are the memories that I remember. I mean, like I said, playing against Boston College with Pete Mitchell and all of the NFL talent, as well as beating Navy, playing on the road at Wake Forest, playing on the road at Duke, playing on the road at Carolina. I mean, these were big time college programs, which is exactly what we all aspired to do when we signed up to play Division I football. It was super exciting. One of the fondest memories, and we talked a little bit about this when we prepped yesterday, when Pat Malcolm, who is a dear friend of mine just down the road here in Atlanta, kicked the winning field goal in the 90-92 game twice from 45 yards plus. Was absolutely thrilling.
Yeah, 12 seconds left. You were involved in 2 really close games, 2 really close Army Navy games, 25-24 that year and 16-14 your senior year. And I mean, they're coming down to the last kicks. It's kind of like last year where, they're going to double overtime and, goal line stand and a Quinn Moretzky kick, and the Army comes off with a victory. I don't know if that brought up memories for you.
100%. Frankly, not to be apropos, but I was there. I was in Philly. I was there with my very best friend, Tony Sima. And, the whole game was kind of back and forth. And the fact that an Army-Navy game, and I think I have this right, Sal, hold me to it, has never gone to overtime until last year is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Given how close those games were. But no, to your point, in the 93 game, I remember at halftime we were winning 9-0, and I'm like, this is too easy. We come out in the second half. Rick Roper takes us down. We score, right? Another 7, 16-0, right? And then the floor drops out. And I'm frankly accountable. I'm the captain of the defense, and we give up 14 straight points. We can't do anything, right? And then they drive right down our face again, right? They get down to like the 4-yard line, and what's his name? Beneteri. Anyways, the Navy kicker, he's got an 18-yard field goal to win the Army-Navy game, and he kicks it wide right. Yeah. And it's just like incredible that we snuck out with that. 16-0. We give away 2 touchdowns. They drive it right down on us again. And it's just like, things are meant to be that are meant to be. And he's a freshman, and I'm a senior. So I'm going to take that one.
Yeah, you probably, I'm guessing that singing second that game after that game had to be incredible. Yeah, Navy kicker was Bonacari, spelt wrong. Yeah. Must have been special singing second after your last game, your senior year, and pulling a game out like that.
There's nothing that compares to it. When, and it's a metaphor on life, right? Like never, ever give up. Even when things are going as wrong as they can possibly go, you never, ever give up. And that's what that game was all about. That game was all about just stay in it. Stay in the game, continue to play. You never know what's going to happen. And who would think that, I think it was 18 yards. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it was 20 some yards, but it was really close. And he missed it. And, you got to take the good with the bad. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
How much do you watch that moment over every once in a while, or no? Or can you just replay it in your head, so to speak?
I can see it like it was yesterday in my head. I don't need to see the videos, even though we do every once in a while. I think they did a throwback Thursday on YouTube a couple years ago, and it was the 93 game. And when I watch those videos and I look at how that game played out, I can 30 years ago, I can see it like it was yesterday.
Wow. It's pretty that's a pretty special moment, right, for you. And now to be an alum and watch the Black Knights have some pretty good success in the CIC games. I researched, like, they're going for their 6th win in the last 4 years, 6-2 in CIC games if they beat Navy.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. If they beat Navy, that'd be their 6th win in the last 4 years. That's a lot of success. And, knowing you had that success over Navy with your 3 wins in 4 years, it's got to be pretty fun to watch this team, the way they compete and play in these games, right?
Listen, I tell anybody who will listen to me, these teams in this last kind of 5-6 years, they are so talented. They would have beat us by 50 points. They're excellent. I mean, they're disciplined, they're hard-nosed, they're super talented. I'm just so impressed at how fast they are. It's been really fun to watch. And it's actually, we, as an alumni, and, a lot of people associate us with Army football, it's really nice to have a team that you're proud of, that you can associate with, and that frankly wins. And I'll be honest, being here in the Southeast, in Atlanta, obviously SEC country, there's a lot of, college football playoff talk and Georgia, Alabama, and all that. And I just sent a text out to all my buddies today, and I said, the college football playoffs don't matter. What matters this week is a trip to the White House.
Very, very true. Very true. Yeah. It puts things in perspective, certainly. Like, I'm going on social media saying Florida State should be in, Florida State should be in. Maybe they were my favorite team back in the day. Maybe they weren't. But you're right. It does put things in perspective where now, this is for the CIC trophy, Army. And right. But that also gives Navy a lot of motivation to play spoiler in this game too. And
listen, the game that we lost my sophomore year, right, 1991, we lost to a winless 0-11 Navy team. We were the only win. And we had a lot of different reasons. Our quarterback was injured and blah, 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 a lot of excuses. But the fact of the matter is anybody can win this game. Literally anybody, no matter what the record is.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting on Saturday from Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. First time the game's going to be in that Boston market, so to speak, and it'll be fun to watch. Black Knight Nation will be there with some coverage. I plan on being there in person to hopefully on the field for most of the game too. That's a great experience to witness those games, and just like you say, you got to remember those times when you're on the field lining up, when Navy's lining up, and just the physicality of those games, right? That hasn't changed over 30 years, I'm imagining.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, some people say that, we're still playing in the Stone Age and, we're not throwing the ball around to, the yard like everybody else is. But man, it is a physical game. The more physical and desperate team will win. Yeah. Because that's what happens in rivalry games. But I really enjoy it. I mean, I got to tell you, I really enjoy the three yards in a cloud of dust. We have a fullback. We run the triple option. So do they. It's a mirror image a lot of times. And the toughest person or the toughest team is going to win.
Yeah, we'll see what what offense they reveal on Saturday.
Right?
I mean, who knows?
I'd like to see them run the option. Boy, it sure worked a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that they say that part of the reason why they went to this gun option was because they weren't scoring many points in these CIC games and they wanted to do something different. But then you see the results that they put up against Coastal Carolina a couple weeks ago, and you're like, man, it was a well-oiled machine pretty much. So I think you'll get a little bit of both, to be honest with you. I think they'll do a little bit under center, a little bit under shotgun. That's my opinion. Haven't seen any practices, not revealing any secrets at all. But I just think maybe they keep Navy guessing, so to speak, and it should be interesting to watch. Just wanted to talk a little bit about some of your teammates. We talked a little bit about Pat Work. We talked a little bit about Joe Ross, and just you talked about a lot of the guys on the defensive line that you're still friends with today. That brotherhood seems to be pretty strong. 30 years later, just talk about the relationships and bonds that you built with those, and maybe even into your military time too, right? Because sure. I know you served with Pat Work.
Yeah, so 7 years. I was an Army officer for 7 years, 2 tours in Iraq and a year in Korea. My last duty station was the 1st Stryker Battalion, 2nd Infantry Division, and I was honored to serve as the fire support officer for then Lieutenant Colonel, but now retired General Mick Nicholson. Pat Work was a company commander inside of that battalion. His executive officer was Joe Chitano, who was a Army football captain. So there's a really famous picture of all of us downrange on a training mission. General retired Nicholson there as our battalion commander, and 3 former Army football captains, myself, Pat Work, and Joe Chitano, which was super cool. And that brotherhood, no matter where we meet on the battlefield, no matter where we meet in service, when you're an Army football player, that is your defining moment during your time in the military. And super elite fraternity, super exciting, but expectations couldn't be higher, right? The expectations to perform are incredibly high when you carry that title as Army football player.
Do you remember a service moment? Like, I know you said, because that's when you kind of maybe were in the thick of it a little bit. Do you remember a service moment where there was that bond that showed through, or maybe what you learned as an Army football player really helped you through a really tough time?
Yeah, for sure. So my first tour in Iraq, I was a 2nd lieutenant, just kind of getting my legs underneath me. And when you are in a forward operating position or a combat zone and you turn around and you look at those 20 other faces looking right back at you, realizing that your leadership is going to be the difference between them going home or not, lets you reflect back on your times as an Army football player to say, listen, there are a lot of people that are depending on me. I must deliver. And when you're under that pressure, because you've been under it for the last 4 years at West Point, you're much more comfortable in that moment than I think some other folks who have gone a different route. So I really cherish not only my time at West Point and the hardening of you as a leader, but as a football player in front of 50,000 people every Saturday. it allows you to rise to those expectations when needed on the forward edge of freedom.
Yeah, and I'm sure there were those times. And man, a lot of former Army football players talk about that, like the hardest thing that they might have experienced. Sometimes, yeah, it was fun, right? Going to practices were fun, but sometimes they were also some of the hardest times. I mean, freshman year, Jim Young was your coach, but Bob Sutton for the last three. And I mean, just knowing stories about Bob Sutton. Do you have a good Bob Sutton story, or do you have time for that?
I'll tell you my best Bob Sutton story. It has nothing to do when we played, right? We played. He was my coach. He was a defensive-minded guy, wildly successful. A lot of people don't realize in the NFL.
Yeah,
I had a great NFL career. But when Coach Sutton was coaching at the Kansas City Chiefs, I needed a reference, and I wanted to leverage his expertise. He picked up the phone on the first ring, and he addressed me like I was still a cadet. He was amazingly cordial, willing to do whatever I asked him to do, and ultimately was a very successful outing for both of us. But I was just really impressed with his trajectory of his career in the NFL. I'm actually now in the business world, but his willingness to support and do anything that I asked because of the time that we'd spent together was really, really unexpected. And I really thank him for that. And I can't say enough nice things about Bob Sutton.
I hear that a lot. I hear that bond between him and his players that never ends. I mean, you probably can call him to this day and he'll pick up the phone on the first ring,
For sure. For sure.
The relationship there built is just amazing. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you're up to now, or what happened after your your military time, and give our listeners a little
I'll give you a 90-second version on what's happened to me now that I've stepped into the real world. I transitioned out of the military through Notre Dame. I went to business school there, had a real college experience for the first time for 2 years at Notre Dame, which was a lot of fun. I spent 15 years at General Electric in their healthcare business, ran their interventional and x-ray business. So healthcare has really been a passion of mine because we're all patients. Whether or not you're in the healthcare system today or you will be tomorrow, making healthcare work in the United States is something that's a passion of mine. So I've spent a variety of different opportunities. Today, I run an organization that basically helps the under or uninsured who have chronic illness find funding for their medical treatments. And I work in a variety of different venture capital-backed organizations. And looking at one now that's going to potentially treat retinopathy for people who have diabetes, and ultimately a huge side effect of diabetes is blindness. And so getting out in front of that and having an annual exam that's available for people in rural or heavily populated urban cities is super critical because diabetes is a big problem in our society. And so we're going to tackle that one next. But super excited about healthcare. That's where my passion is. I love to meet customers. I love to help patients, specifically those that are under or uninsured, because that's a big problem in the United States of America that we shouldn't have, given that we're the wealthiest country in the world.
Yeah, good point. And kind of giving the way of giving back too, and trying to find ways to help those people, right?
For sure.
Really, that's really outstanding. We went through half an hour almost really quick here, Kevin. Lots of good stories. Is there anything else you would like to leave us with before we sign off here? Maybe something that we maybe didn't get to.
No, Sal, I really appreciate it. This has been super exciting. My daughters will laugh about this because they know their dad very differently. Here's what I'd leave you with, because I think this would ring true for a lot of my fellow football players and even West Pointers. Never, ever, ever give up. Never. It doesn't matter what happens to you. It matters how you respond to it. And if you're ever thinking about giving up, please ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay that every once in a while when you fall down to ask for help, because a lot of us vets, that's not our natural tendency, and it's okay. It's all right. Your brothers are here to help, and we'll never give up on you. And I think that's a message that all the vets need to hear, because what they've been through, a lot of people can't relate to, but we can, and we're here to help.
Well said, Kevin. Really appreciate your time. This is Army Navy week, right? And why not have one of the Army's captains on, the guy who has 3 Navy wins under his belt in his career, and man, pumped up for Saturday's latest edition of the greatest rivalry in college football, right?
I agree. Hey, listen, it doesn't matter who got left out of the playoffs. What matters is who's going to the White House on Sunday. Let's go.
Let's go.
Navy.
Nice. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Really appreciate having you on.
You bet. Take care.